Welcome everybody to the Rondo Community Library. My name is Mura and I work with the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. We are so happy to have More Than a Single Story here around this conversation around fatherhood and specifically around grandfatherhood, I'll say. And with that, I just want to welcome the director of More Than a Single Story, Carolyn Holbrook.
Sorry about that, I was just getting a name pronunciation correctly. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming and for spending your evening with us tonight. Just a little bit about More Than a Single Story. We are a Twin Cities-based arts organization with a mission to position the literary arts as a catalyst for cross-cultural healing and social justice. We connect BIPOC writers with broadly inclusive communities through readings, public conversations, and writing workshops that foster insight, empathy, and literary skill building. We are extremely grateful to the voters of Minnesota for grants from the Metro Regional Arts Council and the Minnesota State Arts Board, and to the McKnight, Jerome, St. Paul, and Bigelow Foundations. Their support is what allows us to keep going. Special thanks to the Friends of the St. Paul Library for partnering with us on this series of panels and workshops to celebrate fathers. And a special shout out to Wendy Worden, who isn't here tonight, who worked side by side with us to make this happen. I'm also pleased to give a brief shout out to Ebony Davis back there, who's working with us, and to Murray Wakeham, who just introduced you, or just welcomed you, and also to Pluto and Rachel, who are the young people you see with cameras running around. Rachel is going to video the program, and Pluto will be taking still shots. They just graduated from Pim Arts High School in Eden Prairie. Which is More Than a Single Story's newest project. Yay! So, I'm just very excited about this series, and the idea came to me through these two young men, single father Ben Weaver, and a young married father, Suleiman Adem. Tonight's panel is the third and final panel in the series, and will feature four grandfathers who will share with us how historical practices and events impacted the ways they showed up as fathers, what it's like for them now to see their own children as parents, and how they connect with their grandchildren. They'll also probably give advice for today's young fathers. Tonight's panelists are Russel Balenger, David Mura, Jim Rock, and Ahmed Kaad, who will be some of his words will be translated by Mr. Musa Chama. Okay, thank you. And then we will have time for questions after the panel. More Than a Single Story always begins our panels with a poem. And I'm just pleased that we will not only have a poem tonight by David Mura, but we will also have a few words of Dakota wisdom by Jim Rock. So we will begin with Jim, and then David will offer his poem, and then we'll turn it over to the two moderators. And I'd like for you to read their bios, read everyone's full bio inside of the program, and see who these wonderful people are. So just a brief, abbreviated introduction for Jim and David. Jim Rock, Sisseton, Dakota, has taught chemistry, physics, astronomy for over 40 years. And currently he's an elder in residence at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities Circle of Indigenous Native Center. And David Mura is a sensei, or a third-generation Japanese. He is the author of 2 books on writing and race, 2 award-winning memoirs, 4 books of poetry, and is co-editor of More Than a Single Story's anthology, We Are Meant to Rise, which is on the back table there. And then our moderators, Suleiman Adem is a writer, a poet, a writing teacher, a systems builder, community advocate, and DEI trainer. Currently, he is Deputy Executive Director at CARE Minnesota, the nation's largest civil rights organization. And moderator Ben Weaver is a father, caregiver, songwriter, and poet in a high tenor. He uses music and poetry to strengthen relationships and culture between human and non-human entities. He has released 9 studio albums of music and 5 books of poetry. after the program, please fill out our survey form so that we can know how we're doing. So I'm just going to turn it over now to Jim Rock, and then David Mura, and then our two moderators. Thank you again for coming.
Jättevarsågod, min kaffeapi. Te vastajan on Petri Yusufidov. On vdihan jätteille mahtiapido. Chetish koing oyate hemata. Many Raskar much ahead. Hello, my relatives. I greet you this evening from a glad heart. Offer you my hand. That's the way my dad, Dakota father, had a traditional protocol greeting. Is to greet you from a glad heart. Offer your hand. I said that I was of the 7 Starfire nations, and in the intro you heard my dad was Sisikoan, Dakota. So in our way that tells you which star of the 7 we're connected from. Places up there that match places right here. So then I told you I was born in Minijaska, which is now called St. Paul. So it's good to be back here in our Dakota, Makoche, Minnesota Makoche, the land where the water reflects the sky. So I was thinking about a beautiful vision that not a single story, how we bridge all these different experiences coming from all over the world to this place and trying to model how to be good relatives. That's always our challenge in Dakota when I say, hello, my relatives. We don't just mean as two-legged, the human, but the green plants here, the winds, the crawling, the four-leggeds, So I just very briefly sing a short version of a song, and if some of you would help me. It's all right. And it's going to do a heartbeat. I didn't bring my drum, but yeah. Okay. These are turtle shell rattles, and in our way we think about the 4 directions, but also that north, south, east, west. It's in Japanese, Namboku Tozai, also north, south, east, west, and the above and the below, and in that center that bring us all together. So that's what the heartbeat reminds us of, that center, the navel. And this called Kapemini. Kapemini shows us that sky and earth meet. Might be at the highest mountain, which is really what an island is. When you think of, say, a place like Hawaii, out in the middle of the Pacific, from the ocean floor to the top of that mountain where there's snow. Where that snow melts, there's lava also. And so the air we breathe, okay? Sky and earth, and the air. So that's what the flute is. The flute represents the wind. These represent the rain. So we're being real gentle because we've had we're grateful for rain. Remember, the last 2 years it's been dry, but so this is where the Sky Father brings rain in a gentle way, so that the roots of these green ones can feel that love, the Earth Mother soil. We wouldn't be here as fathers, the grandfathers, uncles, without the women who gave us birth. And in that way, that's the Earth Mother. And she's telling us she needs our help. She needs us to feel this way. So I'll just breathe a little bit here, and then ask you all to share 2 words. So we trade eyeballs, we trade ears and tongues, and we'll just breathe. Let's try that. We chose me. It means light. So I can say, this side wants to sing Ojibwe, this side wants to sing Dakota. Of course, we have thousands of languages here on Turtle Island. That's our turtle rattle. You can add your languages, but we'll just start with those two, because the evening's going to go quickly. So, maybe this side, if you do, we choni, keep that going. We choni, that's the heartbeat. Keep it going. Breathing in, breathing out. We're alive, so alive. Breathing out, breathing in, breath of life. We're alive, so alive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. In the last 2 years, both my parents have passed. And all of their generation has passed in my family. So I'm now the oldest in my extended family. And I realize I'm the vessel and voice for that history. My grandfather came here in 1898. To give you an idea, I mean, that was, Louis Armstrong wasn't even born then. Right. Babe Ruth was 3 years old. And I'm going to read a poem which begins my first book of poetry. So it was written years and years ago when I never thought about becoming a grandparent. Right. And I would tell people it's about imagining my grandparents in bed together. And I always say, you can do that perhaps with your grandparents, but not with your parents. You don't want. But when my father was, during the last few days of his life, I was reading a novel written by somebody from his generation, set in 1925 in Little Tokyo. And my father was lying in the bed sleeping. He would pass in a couple days. And I looked, and there was a photo of my grandparents on the dresser. And I'm reading this novel set in Little Tokyo in 1925, and I realized my grandfather was born in Little Tokyo in 1926. My father was, and I thought of my grandparents making love to great him. And I didn't even think about that in relationship to this poem until this moment. So this is called Grandfather and Grandmother in Love. My grandfather used to play a Japanese stringed instrument called the biwa. And he wrote haiku. So I always identified with him because he was a poet. And when he had a stroke and he couldn't hold his brush anymore, he went upstairs and didn't speak to anybody for a couple days. Otosan, Okasan, our father and mother. Ran means chaos in Japanese. And my grandfather owned and grandmother ran a greenhouse, which they lost when they were imprisoned by the United States government during World War II. So this is called Grandfather and Grandmother in Love. Now I will ask for the one true word beyond betrayal that creaks and buoys like the bed springs used by the bodies that begot me. Now I will think of the moon bluing the white sheets soaked in sweat that heard him whisper haiku of clover, azalea, the cry of the cuckoo, complaints of moles and beetles, blight and bad debts, as the Biwa's spirit bubbled up between them, its song quavering. Now I take this word, crack it like a seed between the teeth, spit it out in the world to root in the loam of his greenhouse roses. Let it leave the sweet taste of teriyaki, a grain of a rice lodged in my molars, in my nostrils, a faint, hot breath of sake. Now as the Tosa and Okasa drift towards each other, there reverberates the ran of lovers, and the ship of the past burst into that other world, and she, still teasing, pushes him away, swats his hand, a pesky, tickling fly, then turns to his face that cries out laughing as he hauls her in, trawling the currents, gathering a sea that seems endless, depths a boy dreams of, where flounder, dolphin, fluorescent fins, fish with wings spill before him glittering scales. And letting slip the net, he dives under, and night washes over them, slipping from sight. Just the soft shush of waves, drifting ground swells, echoing the knocking tide of morning.
Thank you for that poem and song. I have the first question for the group, and I just want to say that I'm really honored to be able to be here with you all. We've done 2 panels. Suleiman did one, and I did one with fathers, and also thankful that all of you are here because we had really sparse attendance for the other ones. And we've talked a lot about why that is, and I think it's not that there's anything wrong, but it's a sign that men don't get a chance to come together and talk about these kind of things, especially in public space. And that's why we both wanted to do this, because when I was raising my kids, there was no place, to do this. So I'm really grateful to have this audience and have all of you here. We wanted to make as much room for you to talk, so we only have 2 questions. Feel free to answer from your heart however you want, and we can go down the line, or just whoever is compelled to speak. We can go in that order too. But my question was, when you were a father, did you have access to cultural teachings specific to your culture, and how did that relationship to those teachings change as you became a grandfather? Informing both your role as a father and a grandfather, if they were available, and if they weren't, what was that experience like to not have that kind of information available?
Sure.
kalsharkay waxa weeye annaga waxaan nahay dad iscaawiyo oo isku xiran oo wada jira oo wax iska noqda caruurta badana saasaan ku korinaa waxaa waxbaa laakiin nasiib daro marka halka wax kala furfursanoo saaqana u annagu waxaan leenahay qaraabo iyo caruur iyo waxaan leenahay in my culture we have our tradition based on connect each other and we advise our children and the grandchildren to have a discipline and help each other and we encourage them to educate themselves to get a good way of living. But we are immigrants here, and I think almost we lost our tradition. This tradition here is disconnected. We are connected each other. We have a neighbor, we have a brother, sister, a relative. We don't have here. Nobody comes to your house. You are alone. So I am almost 80-something, and my children still they are good, but they are taking the way the American living because they were in the school, and I make bomb in my language. I song. So could you translate this?
Yes. No, I think this is the communal parenting, or you might have heard of it takes a village to raise a child. And coming here, that is completely turned upside down because everyone is kind of separate from with their own children, and this concept comes up a lot because the extended family and others being involved in raising children and grandchildren when everyone lives together in the same place. But here in Minneapolis, we have a lot of grandfathers and grandmothers that live in studio apartments, and then the rest of the family or the children there. My uncle has 6 children, and then they have 9 grandchildren live where in different places. So that has actually taken some of the cultural things with.
One second. When I brought my children here, I advised them, we come to this country because reason we came, we got a civil war in my country. We killed each other, and as a result, we came here. And my children, I advised them, the girls, the boys, they cannot marry, they cannot get married until they finish the university. And I pushed them, but some of them, they take the way you are living, American living. Some they have our culture and tradition, some lost. So my song was, I raise you, I help you, I protect you, I brought you here, and I push you to the education, and I observe you, and I am worried about you. But those who take this tradition of America, who left me, one, you know, I get old and I'm weak and I can't stand and I have a back pain and my legs is swollen. Those who left, you will come one day where I am. So they take my advice. They are very good now. They some become doctor, some engineering, computer science. So that's why we help our children. And thanks America, they give us the opportunity. So I pray for America people. And now I am too old, but I hope, you know, nobody live wrong. We are transition. Everybody one day will go, but I hope everything will be okay. And I have 9 grandchildren. I advise them. I often visit them, and I say, show me how do you have in the school A or P or C or D, which you have the grade, and sometimes I give some reward. If you say he or she say I have a plus in front of others, I give money. Yeah. So so everybody make competition. Grandfather will come one day, and they, So thank you very much. I'm glad. I'm very glad. My English is not very good, but I speak 9 languages. Yeah. Hablo español. I speak Ethiopian, Russian, Arabic, Oromo, Somali. In English, many languages I can interpret. But I'm too old. I forget something. You see. So, but it is good. When I come to Spanish people, hello, ¿cómo estás? Muy bien. When I come Arabic, I say, كيف صحتك? أهلا وسهلا. When I come Ethiopian, I say, Amaria Tawar, So I speak 9 languages. So thank you very much for listening to my what I'm saying, and I pray for you.
It was a little different for us. My life began right over this way where the freeway is now, Rondo Kid. And when our homes were there, this was about as far as we came from that area, and we didn't quite go as far as Selby, about to Iglehart. Some of us lived, but beyond there was not. There was not a place for us. When they were told that we would be leaving our homes, our family had a house fire, and we were one of the first families out of there, and our family was split up for a while. My mother came from Kansas with some of her sisters and my uncle, and to make a life here. They were a part of it. They were coming for a better life. My father had come here when he was born in 1901, and he came here when he was about 12. And after we lost our home in Rondo, he became ill and he was unable to speak for the last 10 years of his life. So the people in the neighborhood, everyone knew each other. So there were many men in this neighborhood that would take time and have and would tell me things and try to help raise me. I was a kind of I was always looking to see what was over the next hill, and my mother was she sort of allowed me. She would tell me not to go. Don't leave the block. Don't go up on Selby. Those type of things, and I always did it. And when I found trouble, I just didn't tell it. But as time went on, I didn't have. I didn't know my grandfather or my grandmothers. And the fathers I had were my minister. I was an alcoholic. He would spend every Sunday morning. I would be there to help him get church ready. I would go to the man house. He was a police officer, and I liked the way he carried on. He acted like he was running everything, and I liked that. You see that in a black man. And then there was Mr. Smith, who right over at this church a couple of blocks over had a Boy Scout troop, and I spent every Monday with him. And he would take us camping quarterly, and it didn't make any difference if the heat was unbearable or if there was a blizzard. We were going, and I would tell my mother, it's like a blizzard out there, I'm not going camping. She'd say, get your junk and be by the door. And so I kind of came up that way. So when I was married at 20, at 21 my first child came, and at 23 my second one had arrived. I didn't have plans for any of that. I managed to buy a house, but most of my time as a father was spent trying to make sure there was food on the table and my kids were dressed. And they were wanderers too, so I spent a lot of time making sure that the doors were locked and they couldn't get out. People would bring them home, and so those are the things I worried about. When my oldest son, turned 15, I turned around and saw that his daughter was pregnant, or my son's girlfriend was pregnant, and he was still in high school. And so in terms of the cultural thing, we came from, there was a blend of cultures in my family. And so it was more of a matter of, my mother's sister had 9 kids, my mother had 6, and I was the youngest. And when her sister passed, those 9 sort of became like an extension of our family. And that's how our family was. Whenever there was a problem or somebody was having a bad time with one of the others, my mother would always remind us that we are a family and we would not be fighting each other. And I carry that on to these days. When I see my grandchildren are having a feud on Facebook, I call down to my sons and tell them, who's in charge down there? And put it back on them.
Oh, you know we throw it. You know what? Very good words. Yeah, it's been. We probably met a couple times over the years. We've been talking about growing up in St. Paul here and these changes, and hearing this train here now, and so ate. That's our word for dad. Ate. And mother ina. So, very similar to the village, how we all take care of each other, and that a father's brother is also your father, rather than calling Dekshi uncle. Mother's sister, also ina. That means that in the European way, cousins are your siblings. So we always have that built-in community, the circle. I like to think it's like TV poles that lean together, and they're tied together. But yes, the challenges of making a living these days in this work world, the education world, a world that it's hard to say this briefly, but my dad's grandparents, great-grandparents, 1862, they'd already endured over 50 years of major changes, promises never kept, and they had to leave here under penalty of death. Was up to a $200 bounty. Governor Ramsey, they walked 1,000 miles northwest up into Saskatchewan. And it didn't matter if you were Ojibwe or Ho-Chunk or Dakota at that point, they just wanted the first people of Turtle Island here out. And so you probably heard that history, but this is the day after Juneteenth, today as we're doing this. And I asked who, we the people, are we the people? We know when those words were written, put in ink, we weren't the people. And actually, the way Ate and his grandmother lived to be 8 days short of 100. She didn't speak to him in English. I don't know that she had even heard English, but Ate didn't speak English till 12 years old. That's when he went to the boarding school. And they said, stop thinking that way. Don't talk, don't be that way anymore. So loss of culture, even though we're living right here. All of us, as I think about our family's names, the role of English as a colonial, it wasn't just a bridge language, and it's an honor to meet someone with all those languages as well. I admire, but how our children and our grandchildren can stay strong in their own ways and also be open and trade eyeballs with the other ways. My Takoja, granddaughter and grandson, she's 17 and he's 15, almost 16. They're both at St. Louis Park High School. Almost all the friends are, wear hijab. They also speak many languages. I'm very proud of them. They aspire to education. They don't get in trouble. They work hard. They work in jobs, even now in high school, to prepare for college. It's just a hard life, This promise of capitalism, it's not working out, as we all know. And the planet is telling us, our mother is saying, it's not sustainable. We can't keep asking mom for more. She's telling us that. I think we all know that, we the people, but in our way, the humans came last. The plants and the little crawling ones, and the winged, the four-leggeds, as I said, the swimming, they were here billions of years before us. So we have the most to learn from them. We are the pitiful ones. Mushika, have pity on us. Help us. So I guess that value of have confidence, but not so that it's not about us as humans. It's not all about us. So as I think about those kids in their high school experience, there's been conflicts. I know you've heard some of those, and it could be any high school, it didn't have to just be that one, but it has to do with learning to love each other. I think our mom wants us all to love each other, and so do the dads, obviously. It's just these boarding school experiences broke up our families, just as slavery did, as immigration, as the camps that you would place your family into as well, and removing your memories. There was no hereditary wealth, intergenerational. It was, so I think we're all in healing mode, and the best way to understand that then is through that love. So I'm very grateful. I got a lot of love from Grandma, so did my dad. And so I guess if I could say how to be grandparent is, hopefully you've had one that could model for you.
If you would have asked me this question when I was in my 20s, I would have said Japanese culture had no effect on me. In my early 30s, I spent a year in Japan and wrote a memoir about it. And my mom and dad came to visit. My mom said to me, you know, I think we raised you to be individuals first, Americans second, and we didn't think about you being Japanese or Japanese American. And my parents were imprisoned by the United States government during World War II at ages 11 and 15. My grandparents were imprisoned. My grandparents were not allowed to become citizens. And it took me a long time to realize the effect of this on my parents. Because what it said to them was your ethnicity and race are a crime. Like, because they were 15, they had done nothing. No Japanese American was ever convicted of espionage. So, and they did not round up Italian Americans or German Americans. So the message was, and a teacher in the camps a white teacher told my father, when you get out of the camps, you should be not 100%, but 200% American. And my parents took that to mean we must become like white middle-class Americans. We must lose, because our race and ethnicity, our culture is a crime. And so when I was in high school, and a white friend would say to me, I think of you, David, like a white person. I think that's great, that's what I want to be. And it really wasn't until my late 20s that I began reading black authors, and I suddenly went, oh my God, I'm not white. Who the hell am I, right? And I had to go back and begin to look at all this very differently. And so I've written a lot about, you know, our history. One of the things, I've done a movie, Armed with Language, which is about the Japanese American linguist who worked for the Military Intelligence Service during World War II, and General MacArthur's chief of intelligence said that they shortened the war in the Pacific by 2 years and saved 1 million American lives. You know, they served much like the Native American code talkers, right? And I always say this is a clear demonstration of the value of diversity, right? Because at the beginning of the war, America realized, well, we have white people who speak Italian, we have white people who speak German. You know, we don't have an Indian white who speaks Japanese. What are we going to do? And they had to go into these camps where they'd imprison the Japanese Americans and say, will you come and work for us? Now, as I grew older, what I realized is, and then I also rebelled against my father was a typical Asian American dad. You know, I get a B+, it's like, what is this B+? And I rebelled against that, and I sort of, and I talked to my youngest son here about it, like, I said, I'm not going to become like my father and a tiger dad and really be harsh. And I realized, like, I could have, given my personality, I could have tried to be like my dad, and I would have never got anywhere close because I'm much too much a softie. So I probably should have been harder. But it was only later that I learned that these these Japanese cultural values. Kodomo to tame ni, for the sake of the children. Shoganai, it can't be helped. Gaman, endure. The nail that sticks up gets hit down. Now, I have not been the nail that hides. I've been the nail that sticks up, and I've gotten it down. But what I realized is a lot of cultural values, even though my parents didn't consciously think we're going to pass Japanese cultural values down, values of modesty, of endurance, of not making a big thing about yourself, right, is there inside me. But what I realize now is, you know, in Asian cultures, you worship ancestors, right? And in a lot of cultures. And it's this sense of, you know, you're not the be-all to end-all. Right? There are people who came before you who allowed you to be here. And I think one of the things about being a grandparent and getting older and getting to be my age is your ego has to shrink. Because you're not the main thing anymore. Your kids and your grandkids are the main thing. And you're there to help them and to support them. And suddenly you have a very different view about time. I think of, you know, Jim was mentioning, you know, 1862. It's like, and he's mentioning not like, you know, that was like way long ago. No, that's part of who he is. My grandfather's part, you know, in 1898 coming here, and then my grandson Tadashi is probably going to see 2100.
Yeah.
So I'm the bridge between two centuries, right? And so I'm the small little bridge between all of that. And the funny thing is, I think, when you realize that, you become more content, right? You stop some of the ego grasping and stuff, and and then also it's about love, because you realize like I realize like you're a young man, you know, a lot of your first impulse is to fight, right? You're an old man. It's ridiculous for you to do that, right? So you got to find some other stance in which to approach the world. And I realized lately it's about love. It's about loving this earth that I'm going to leave, right? Loving the people that are going to be behind. And you know, part of me, I can hear the little cranky old man like, why don't they do this here? But I also feel this sense of just love. And certainly with my grandchild Dash, that's certainly what I feel, very much so. And I suppose what I'll end with is like, you never stop learning how to be a better human being, and to be more human.
Wow, I've only been a father for 3 years. It feels like much longer outside, so yeah. But listening to this, oh my gosh, that's nothing. It's not even a drop in the bucket. It's like the water that's about to drop in the bucket as compared to all of you. The next question that we have is, how do you balance giving advice and guiding your adult children whilst also respecting how they want to do things with their children?
Oh, yeah, giving them space to make mistakes, because as David said, about ego, we all make mistakes. So if I were to impose my own vision, that might not help them at all. In fact, it might make it worse. So, but you want to be close enough if they call you need. The reason I had to sing that song in Dakota, the first language of this place for 13,000 years since the glaciers melted. That's a lot of zeros. Is because our kids and grandkids are Dakota and Ojibwe. Ojibwe Odawa. It's a different language family from the east side of the Turtle Island here. And just like these different parts in the turtle, there's 13 shapes, 3 and 10, you know, so which part of the turtle are your people's roots, your ancestors, where are you from here, you know? So it's giving the, especially because then if those people they marry and those other parts of us and those ancestors, those teachings, those words, the dreams, the songs, those teachings that come in, we have to be open that we can learn from our own mistakes, I guess. So I'm just proud that, you know, we're still, her daughter was single mom, so we got to have a lot of close time with our Takoja. The word Takoja works for a girl or boy. And took her to language immersion programs the first 5 years. And, I want to give great thanks to Diane Wilson for recommending me to be on this panel too, because she was founder of this Stream of Wild Health, this piece of land that is so important as Dakotas. We're to try to come back here. 90% of us aren't here anymore, so that land connection, to feel how good it is to know you can grow the food of your ancestors, eat that food, these ancient seeds that we were gifted. And so both of our grandkids have worked there. And it's, you know, it's intertribal because they're kids from the city. Like you had said, whether it's camping experiences, you know, and maybe they didn't know about bugs or messy things or compost. And but now they do, and they've chosen to want to keep doing that. So yeah, I guess learning to sing together. So that one word is 3 syllables, the other word is 5 syllables. How do you put 3 and 5 together? We use the heartbeat, 2 and 4. You know, there's a lot of math in nature, from the turtle shell to around. So, but I'm a STEM person. I know if I push too hard in the sciences, without the culture, language, arts, humanities, you know, that's, yeah. So I guess I'll stop there.
Well, as I mentioned, my son was 15 when his first child was on the way. He turned 16 when the time she was being born. And my granddaughter's mother, her mother had died when she was 7 years old, and her father passed away before she had this baby. So she came to live with us, and we had this baby. I kind of knew something would probably, I moved across the street from the high school that they were at, and I would see my son playing with the babies that were being brought into the school, that would be going to the nursery in the school. And I would ask, where did those babies come from? Because they didn't have them when I was in school. There was no nursery there. And he loved those kids. And that first baby came, and I was changing diapers again, and bathing her every night. And in another year and a half, my wife would say that she was pregnant again. And I thought, oh my God, I got to do this all over again. And in the meantime, my sons would continue to have children, and while I was raising a daughter, and they would get in trouble, and eventually they were old enough to drag their little black plastic bags down this driveway and said, well, see you, Dad. And I told them, you can use the luggage, just bring it back. I saw a lot of grandchildren come, and I liked to play with them and growl at them, but that was a new thing for me, of what of them to just give them money. And I never forget my second son saying, I don't have all those kids like Russ does, Dad. I've only got 9. And so with my daughter's children, I have 26 grandchildren. And with my grandchildren's children, I have 18 great-grandchildren. One just born 2 months ago. So I'm still saying, who's in charge? My daughter's kid, she's closer. She lived close. And she was always like, come over and help with this. And we didn't get that so much from the others. But her oldest son was 3. And we had a kind of a thing. I named my children, their names all start with an R like mine. And then as they began to have children, they kept the joke going. And I said, oh my God, there were 4 Russells before you knew it. And then my daughter's 3-year-old, his name is Russell too. And she said that that there was something, he would be a delayed speaker. And when he'd see me pull up to the house, he would always rush out into the driveway to welcome me in. And one day, he was doing something with the door, and as we went to go in, the door was locked. And he looked at me and he said, oh, the door's locked. And I told my daughter, he spoke. He said something to me. She said, sure, Dad, sure. I said, no, really? And from that time on, he was speaking in sentences. And I always say that I played with him a lot. And I don't know, I think he just kind of watched me, and there were things that he picked up. I didn't try to tell them what to do. I didn't feel like it was my business. I was lucky to have a son-in-law, my favorite son-in-law, the only one, who came to me when they got married and said, he was an only child. He said, she doesn't have to go to work. She can do her artwork, and she can have as many kids as she wants. And I said, oh my God. And I remember when that first one came and I said to his mother, she could have as many as my sons. And she said, oh my God, no. And so her fourth child was just born 3 months ago. And we finally got a little girl. And so I can look at those kids, and I guess I can look at them crazy enough that they just do what I tell them. And they don't mind their parents at all. But if I tell them stop it, they'll stop. And just on Father's Day, we were barbecuing, and their father said, we're not taking the pool out, we're not going to do this, we're not, and the whole time he was saying that, they were putting that pool up, they were getting everything, and I felt proud. I felt like they got that from me. Because we do it anyway. He said the pump's not going to work. I didn't put the battery in there. My grandson had this little big pump, and he said it's going to take you all day to make that thing fill up. In minutes, he had the first layer done. He never stopped pumping. I said, I just love them kids. So I'm thrilled to have these grandkids, and I feel like if you live long enough, you know how to do everything. I don't know if I'll live that long.
My dad would say any 5-year-old can do what I do with 70, 80 years experience. We have our names too. All ours.
as I told you before, we left our tradition. So our children are adopting this tradition, and I follow with them to advise. You know, I don't beat them, I don't harass them, but I make flattering and I give tip if he does something good. And once a week, I told them to bring to my home, and I teach my language, Somali, because I afraid they forget, you know, their culture. So I teach them Somali, and I push them to make discipline and to respect each other. And I talked about the level of education they are learning in school, and how they respect their mothers and their father. So frankly speaking, most of them, they are disciplined, they are good condition, and they respect each other, and they learn very good. As a grandfather, you know, I am retired. I don't have anywhere to go, so always I try to see them and help them and advise them and tell them to help each other. Sometimes the grandchildren give $30 or $40, and I say, send your auntie back home, because I teach him, you know, to connect the relative and how to. I saw one time why I was doing this. One of my neighbor boy, the mother, she said, talk to your grandma. Who is she? He doesn't know, because she didn't teach him. So I think American tradition, some parts good and some parts bad. Anyway, for example, we visit each other. Even the neighbor, we connect. I remember one day I was walking in downtown, and I met a Somali man, and he said, an old man is in this facility. You know, he can't walk. So I bought lunch. I didn't know him. I bought lunch for him, and he said, sir, I bought you this lunch. How are you? And he said, I'm okay. So 3 white men like him, his legs like that. So they were sitting. So to know the tradition, I say, sir, how are you? He said, I'm fine. What is your name? John. Oh, how long have you been here? He said, 8 years. Do you have children? Yes. How many? I have 4. Do they often come to you? And he said, last year one girl came to me. You see, we don't have this tradition. We connected. If you are neighbor, if you are neighbor to us, we have to, you know, to respect you and to know you and to help you. So we teach our children like this. So God bless us. So thank you for listening. Maybe my English is not good, but anyway you hear me.
Yes.
You see?
thing I feel is I feel confident my children will be good parents. And they all have good hearts. And they have the values of my wife and I in terms of believing in this American experiment, which is, can we live in this country of different cultures, different races? Can we work together? Can we get along? And that's very much the spirit in which I and my wife have tried to raise them. My daughter is the representative from the sewer district in the Minnesota legislature, and she sponsored the ethnic studies bill. And she said, you know, and this is to teach the history and cultures of BIPOC people. And she said, when my father was growing up, he didn't get to learn about the internment camps or Japanese American history in school. I didn't get to learn about the history of Japanese Americans in our school. But I want my son, Tadashi, to be able to do this. Both my sons are going out with people of different races. They're learning other languages. They're really good men. Like, you know, and sometimes it's hard to raise, especially boys who aren't troubled. My friend Alex Pate has this program called the Innocent Classroom, which is designed to train teachers to improve their relationships with students of color. And one of the things that he says is that, you know, first day we asked, you know, what does American culture say about children of color? And if you get the teachers to be honest, you get a list which is just entirely negative, almost completely. And in the training we say, if you, the teachers know this list, the children know this list. And your job is to make sure that this list has nothing to do with the way you look at these children or the way they look at themselves. And that they should come into the classroom and in an atmosphere where they're innocent of all these negative stereotypes and negative images. And these permeate the culture, and oftentimes it's very hard to weed the children away from that, those negative stereotypes. But I think one of the things that I think that we have to do for this younger generation is help them to not be attached to these stereotypes, because these are messages about who they are, which are just simply untrue, because they're children. We should regard them as innocent. We should regard them as having infinite potential. And we should help create a world where they feel that way, and many of them don't. The other thing I would say, you know, and I told my daughter this, I said, you need to take time for your relationship with your partner. Right? You know, raising your child is absolutely important, but you having a good relationship with your partner is also important. And the thing you can do as a grandparent is just simply babysit so that they can have time for each other, right? And to help them when those times, you know, that they just, it's like, you know, could we have a little time, you know, just out, you know, or just to have a relief. You know, and as we know, the great thing about being a grandparent is you can take care of the kids and you can, you know, spoil them a little, give them ice cream or whatever, and then send them back to their parents. But to give them time to be with their partner or to relieve the stress of whatever they have about parenting. Yeah,
is time to open up for questions from the audience if people have any questions.
Yeah, Jimmy, is it, one of the things I tell people is racism is not only immoral, it's stupid.
Yeah.
And it's uncreative. It's just like, you know, when I speak to corporations, I say, do you want 50 managers just exactly like me? Of course not. You want men and women, you want people of different ethnicities, different races, different ages, LGBTQ people, and you're gonna come up with better ideas, right?
Stronger.
Yeah.
I have a question for Ahmed. Manaba shay kartaa markii aad Soomaaliya kusoo koraysay magaaladay kusoo kortay iyo aabaha iyo hooyadaada dhaqanka ay kusoo bareen ma ka hadli kartaa iyo waqtigaas soo koraysay
waqtigaas marka wadanka
markaa soo koraysay aad markaa wiil ahayd
meeshaan kusoo koray
haa
aniga marka xagga tugshugaan aniga waxaan kusoo koray waxaan ku gashay baadiyaan
I was born in the countryside.
aabahay iyo hooyaday afar caruur anigu aan ugu weynahay bay heleen
My mother and father had 4 children. I was the oldest.
xoolaha waxaan ka lahayn 40 arig ah iyo hal rati
And we had 40 goats and 1 camel. That was our research.
markaan 10 jirayna aabii waa dhintay
When I was 10 years old, my father passed,
ratigii aan biyaha ku dhaasishayna waa baktay
and the camel died.
6 bilood baan meeshii fadhinay
We were there for 6 months.
bacdi aniga hooyadii iyo ayeeyadii waa ka dhuuntay taariikh baa timi
After that, I ran away from my family. I was 10 years old.
muqdisho baan baabur u dhuuntay meel beledweyne la yidhaha markaan marayno uu istaagay marka adugu maarka waxbaa raadinaya baaburku iga tigi
I got on a bus to go to Mogadishu, which is the capital, and then there was a bus stop, and as I was doing something, the bus left.
markaan waxaan garanayaa rati iyo dameer iyo waxaasaan garanayaa nin dameer u raran yaha arkay waxaan noo socotaa muqdisho maalintii dambe
And then I saw a man who had
kabacdi beenku ii sheegay haahu yidi ethiopian ku kulay
and then I ended up in Ethiopia.
10 years baan jiray markaas
I was 10 years old.
kabacdina adiga dad soomaaliya ay qabtay waxay geliyeen wax la yidhaha Mennonite mission
And then Somali came to my help, and they took me to a Mennonite mission that was.
marka meesha wax ku bartay oo ku weynaan
And then I went to school there.
muxuu ahaa kabacdi markii aan weynaadana markaasna alleeda waagii hore xamar baa muqdisho waan u socotay miya muqdisho baan kusoo noqday
After I got older and grew up, and then I went back to Mogadishu. That's the original.
how long after like meeqa sano kadib
How many years? That's not
17 sano
17 years.
kabacdina adiga waan shaqaystay beerley baan noqday
Became a farmer.
eerta waa ii baxday aniga nin kale waa hagaagtay waxbaa dhalay waa fiicnaaday waa guursaday markaas
And then I got married.
marka gabadha markii oon mataqaana aan isbaranayn waan u geeraa geerar mataqan
When I met
song baan u sameeyey
when I met the girl I was going to marry, I did a poem or a
waxaana iri haddaan gabar yahay baabuur wax badan kaa dhiibo qamaari gabadha qamaari baan dhahay haddaan baabuur qamaariya kaa dhiibo qolduson haddaan kula galo qodobka kaa gooyo qalbigayga iyo kayu was qaban lahayn ba
It was a song for praising her beauty and
kabacdi waxaan helay 5 ilmood baan helay
then I had 5 children.
aduu bacdar waqti sidii war baa dhacay sidii warkiina halkuu i keenay
So that was Civil War, and then I ended up here.
welina maan noqon hadda 1990 baan soo galay halka
Came here
mana noqonin
and came back.
laakiin waa ku balaan jiraa inaan barbar noqdo
I'm hoping to go back.
aan fiiriyo sidii aan ariga u raaci jiray ariga baan raaci jiray markaan 10 jirka ah
Maybe I'll hurt some foods.
ya waana gabi jiray waqtigaas waana heesi jiray markaan 10 jirka ah garad marka thanks God carruurta waa koreen carruur badan bay yeesheen anigi weli waa xoog baanahay weli maskaxdaydana waa fiican tahay
I can still be.
saaxiibo badanna waa leeyahay
I
oo
have a lot of friends.
american iyo nin kasta isugu jiro marka thank you very much
Quick question. I'm wondering what advice you would have, particularly for young people who whose fathers are either absent or are physically present and emotionally absent, or just there's a tumultuous relationship, just in general, and like as I guess like going into adulthood and trying to heal from some of those wounds and also not to pass on maybe some of those unhealthy habits that they have learned from that parent.
That is our
One thing I recommend my friend Alex Bates' book called Finding the Cave. And it's about a black man who sort of leaves his family and then reunites with his daughter. And it's about the healing process, but it also explores why he left and his complicated feelings about it. And it's not, at all endorsing that decision, but helping you to understand that. And what I think was so interesting is when he published that book, in every reading, there were black men who would show up who had lost touch with their children. And I think one of the things is, you are wounded, and of course, this is a great wound, but to understand that when this happens, it's also the men who this happens to, they're also wounded, right? And then it's also, I think, for any of us who being the parents, it's about forgiveness. And the forgiveness is as much for yourself as anybody, right? So you don't carry that around. And sometimes it's very hard to forgive our parents. It just is. But, it is a spiritual task. Right? And whatever spirit or religion you follow, you have to tap into that, right, in order to forgive. And I think it's the other thing is like finding love inside yourself, which is so hard when you feel traumatized, when you feel hurt, when you feel angry, when you feel bitter. And it's not, I don't think that you stop feeling those feelings, but you find a deeper love that can help you heal it. Right? And so much of our religion is about finding that deeper love, which is so hard for us to find. But it can heal us. And I think my friend Alex would talk about, he had to recover his own sense of innocence. You know, and it really came out of, years ago there was a policeman who was shot and killed in a pizza parlor on Lake Street. And there was a police sketch of a black man in dreads. My friend Alex has dreads, so he'd walk into a restaurant, he'd look at him, look at the sketch. He'd walk into a grocery store, look at him, look at the sketch. He'd walk into a restaurant, they'd look at him, look at the sketch. And he's driving down the highway in 94, and he has this feeling like he's killed somebody. And the feeling is so powerful, he has to drive to the side of the road and say to himself, no, you didn't kill anybody. And what he realizes, he had so inculcated the guilt and the negative stereotypes from a racist society that he had hallucinated that he killed somebody. And so he understood, and this is the beginning of his innocent classroom, he understood that his recovery from the racism of America was to recover his own sense of innocence and to free himself from all those negative messages. And I think that's also, true in your case. Whatever, negative messages you carry around inside yourself, the more you can free yourself from that.
You use that word inculcated. Just wrote about that. I mean, it's Latin. The root word calx. Calx, heal. So to be under that unity. So I just take that foot and bang. It's like, it's hard though. Whose foot is that? Sometimes we got our own on there. We feel that weight. Yeah, those burdens and traumas, intergenerational ones that we have ceremonies that can help in that too. I think that's part of being healing here, all of us together, learning from each other's ways, reparative justice, spiritual traditions, so that we can mourn together and find hope together, get stronger together, fill those holes, not with chemicals or being here. Yeah. I wish you, pray for you the best. There was a question in the back.
I have more of a comment and a small question. So the Somali culture is a culture that's rooted in a legacy of dignity and bravery. And we didn't know about racism, which we found it here. We do not know racism because we come from a very pride in the whole African, it's a homogenous settings that we grew up in, that we came up people who look like you. And even though there were large Italian presence in Somalia, they were just embraced. There was no such knowledge as racism, and so it's difficult for us to understand or buy into it. And it can be sickening for the younger people whose parents don't identify with what they're experiencing. So I write, and I was given a presentation, book sharing at a school called, it's a high school, Central. And there were many East African Somali children in the room. And there were hoodies, and no one was sitting tall. Everyone was looking down, and it was heartbreaking for me because that was a symbol of what they're feeling. And I'm used to young men standing tall and having a voice, and I see that voice being dimmed constantly. So I asked Abel, you were calling a woman, right? You were saying grandfather, and I'm saying Abel, uncle. How do we sustain, how do we hold on to the most valuable asset that we came with, which is our sense of dignity?
Our experience coming from that one homogeneous culture is different from African American or Japanese or Native American living here, and it's kind of come from behind, where you're just trying to figure out what it means and how we fit in to this and all that. And yes, experienced racism and even cultural or religious discrimination. It's a tough thing to deal with, but it's one of those things that living in a culture like this where there is a diversity, you have to kind of adjust yourself and see the best.
I'm just curious, how many have read Isabel Wilkerson's Cast book? It's been out 4 years now. And now the film Origin, right? Which is based on that. It gives you a little more background as to her journey. I just saw that 2 nights ago. I read the book 4 years ago, and in fact, we formed a group at our university campus to break down those caste barriers between faculty and staff, right? If you don't have a PhD, or you only have one PhD, or you're an undergraduate, or you're on the night shift, pushing the broom, because when you love someone apart from caste, when you refuse to enter into those levels, you will be beaten like the hammer, the nail sticks out, right? We chose to stick out a lot. We went from 6 people to 200 people. And we did it without working with unions, because we would just look each other in the eye, learn to say each other's name, hear each other's stories like this on that campus. Now, I can't say too much more but I'm grateful that if you haven't seen the film, please do that as well, because I didn't realize the pain that she went through in her own journey, losing her husband and her mother, and not refusing. People were trying to talk her out of it. All of us who had bought into the system, they're like, no, you can't connect what's happening in India to what happened in Nazi Germany to what's happening here in the States right now in 2016. You can't connect all those dots beautifully, right? Strong. So we got to take a deep look in there and see how are we still reinforcing those layers. And just let's keep talking about it.
I think one of the things that happened in Rondo was that many of the people, they looked out for each other. And for many of us, we tried to do everything with as much dignity as we could. We never wanted to bring any shame home to our mothers and fathers. Sometimes we had to remind each other of that. But I think it's something we have to model for those that come behind you. It's not always easy. But it's one of the things that when I think about my mother, she modeled it all the time. And the things she would say to me, with Melvin sometimes, before she would go to bed, she'd say, make sure the door is unlocked in case someone needs to get in. If I said I wasn't able to get something, she would say, you didn't want it bad enough. If you didn't get an A on your report card, she'd say, well, what did you get? And I got a B, I got a B plus. And she would just we would just leave that conversation.
There are a few announcements. I'll be brief. I've only been married for 5 years, and I grew up without my dad. He's alive, just mass divorce. And as an adult, I've grown to connect with him as men and repairing that relationship as father and son. And my experience with fatherhood being a son, and my experience as fatherhood as being a father, same thing with Ben, really sparks this conversation. One of my grandfathers is still alive, the other died in the war. A few, last winter, I had the opportunity to have my daughter visit her maternal grandfather. She met my father and my grandfather, but she got to meet her mother's side in Ethiopia. And being able to see, like you were saying before, David, being in the middle or being a part of such a chain is beautiful. So I just wanted to thank you for being able to give us a living example of that chain. If y'all could help us thank them.
Thank you again, grandfathers, for a beautiful conversation. And thank all of you, and even Tadashi for being here. And I'd like to remind everyone to please fill out this form on both sides so that we can have an opportunity to talk about what we're doing and what we need to change. And then we want to talk a little bit about